Okay, so the first thing I'll get you guys to do is just launch Unity, and we're going to create a new project. If you've already done so, great. Won't require too much more loading then. So at the top, once you've launched Unity, you'll see a big prompt come up, giving you a Projects tab and a Learn tab. Just going to go to the top right where it says New, click on that, and you'll get the option to name your project and choose its directory. So I'm fine with where it's where it's going to save my project. To name my project, I'll go with, in this case, March mid, just because we're the middle of the day in March, and then create project. It's a matter of waiting a little bit for it to finish being created.
Mine is still launching, so.
Okay, I'll give it a minute. Today it's going to be a smooth day. Going to be trying to be just getting in there comfortably, just learning the interface, getting comfortable with using Unity. All of its moving around, looking around, and just basic interface. No coding today.
And you want us to be on 207.2 of 0F3, right?
The latest version would be the best. It's not going to matter too much.
Okay. I actually went back in time because I thought the directions said older versions. So
it's fine. Whichever one you want to use is fine.
Okay.
Now I'm just going to double check. Chad, you said you have access to all the headsets essentially?
Yeah, I've got a Google Daydream, 3 Rifts, 3 Vives, and then of course your cardboards and things.
So Daydream, 3 Rifts, and 3 Vives.
Yep.
And then,
and mixed reality, 1 mixed reality.
Oh, and MR, okay.
Lenovo, yeah.
I think we have the Samsung one here. And Scotty Jones, you're torn between using the Oculus and the Vive, is that right?
Torn on because I don't know which is which is going to be better for me long term. You said you're partial to the Vive. Is there a reason why? Or Vive? Is there a reason why?
Yeah, so in terms of Vive versus Oculus, Vive you get more of a room scale view, so you can really walk around a bigger room and sort of turn 360, where with the Oculus you really have these 2 forward-facing sensors, and if you turn around and your controllers happen to be like this, you're losing tracking and you don't have that.
Okay. So based on what I want to do, and we'll get into that later, Vive might be the better option.
Yeah, sure. Based on the equipment Chad has, usually I try to go off what equipment the students have. So if you were to have a Vive and Chad was to have a Rift, I would be teaching as if my students only have those 2. So I would be teaching both Vive and Rift together in the course.
Okay.
Since Chad has so many, I think I might as well just do all 3 and see if I can fit in Daydream in here as well. So this is going to be a very multidisciplinary course, unless Chad wants to focus on something in particular, but I think we're okay. It's not too much of a difference between them. All right, so Scotty and Chad, are your Unity projects open?
Yes.
All right, Scotty and Chad, you have this window open ready?
Yep.
Perfect. So hopefully you guys can, so obviously you can see my screen. I'm going to just point out some of the tabs that you're looking at here. I think I'll go into the default view so we're looking at the same thing here. So this is what it looks like on your screen, I'm guessing then, right?
I'm not seeing anything but you.
Oh.
Yeah, me either.
Fair enough. Okay.
Which is great.
Not as useful, I'm sorry. Okay, so is this what you guys are seeing laid out exactly like this?
Yes.
I went to the assets folder and downloaded some of the assets because I got an email about doing that. So I have another asset store tab that I'm going to try to get rid of. I'm going to close that tab.
Oh, that's fine. This is the one you're seeing, right?
Hierarchy asset. Yeah, I just closed it.
All right, that's fine. I'll explain some of these things anyways, but that's the Asset Store tab that you'll see. Anyways, I've switched it over to the default layout just so that you guys can sort of follow through with me and I'm not pointing at things that you're not seeing. That was essentially what I was making sure of. Now, first thing I'll point out is each window is scalable. You can customize your panels however you want. You can click these tabs that you're seeing. You can click and move them around so that you're more comfortable with the way you're developing. I will, however, ask for the remainder of this course to try, or at least for the first couple weeks, to try and keep it the same, just so that we're referring to things the same when I'm pointing at something, and then as you guys get comfortable, yeah, move around as much as you want, make yourself as comfortable. One of the things I like to do is have my scene and game tab together. I'll go over a little bit of that later. Now, what I'm looking at right now is called the scene view. This is showing me everything in the particular application that a player would be able to see. So right now, the only things that are listed in this entire world are a camera and a directional light. Now, if sorry to say this, if you guys don't mind muting your mics when you're not talking, that'll be great. So the camera is going to be what the user of your application is seeing. This is their only eyes, especially right now. This is the directional light. This is referring to essentially what your sun is. This is the one light that's going to be applied through your entire environment. If you notice, when I select these objects, I can choose to do that in my scene view, which again is what you as the editor, you are essentially a god with this view. This is what you can see. On the far left is called the hierarchy tab. This is a list of everything in your scene right now. It's very handy. Now, left hierarchy is your list, scene is your view, and on the far right is called your inspector tab. So whenever I select an object, I can inspect it and see all of its properties through this tab. At the very top, you'll see its name. So this one's called main camera. I can go in there and change its name to whatever I want. And right next to that is a little tick box. That simply is your option to turn an object on and off. So if I check that off, that object's off in the scene. So it does nothing. And anything attached to it will do nothing as well. I'll get into more of these in later in the course, but just for now, that's what you know. It's on, off, and the name here. Now, a really important component that's going to be present in every single object in your view, in your entire scene, is this one here called transform. So no matter what I create, no matter what I put in here, it's going to have a transform. The rest of the things are going to be specific to that particular object. This main camera transform is going to refer to its position, rotation, and scale. So right now its position is 0 in the X, 1 in the Y, and -10 in the Z. These numbers are going to be metric units. So 1 is 1 meter. In terms of rotation, if I put 45, that's going to be degrees. And scale, that's going to be, again, in meters, but this is really dependent on the model itself. So if you bring in a 3D model of a dragon or something, the scale is going to be dependent on whether or not that object is scaled appropriately in the software that you use to create that 3D model. Next, these are going to be whatever components you'll see specific to the object. We'll sort of knock down, we'll go through these as we proceed. Going through every single type right now will be overwhelming, I'm sure. Just going to a quick example of the camera. This is the component that makes this object into a camera. There's a bunch of properties in here we won't worry about for now, but just know that that's kind of what the idea of these components are. This type here is transform. This component is a camera. We go select our directional light, we'll see the same thing, transform. Now after transform, again, the components are just going to be specific to that object. Here we see a light. The light we can control. This is kind of a really useful thing to sort of change the entire environment's light at once. And so you can do that by actually just changing its rotation. These effects will be more obvious. will be more obvious as we proceed. Now, those are the three big ones here. The one at the bottom you're seeing is your projects tab. Now, this is what's storing all of your information. This has all your files, all your 3D models, all the things you're using to code. Everything is in here. Next to that is called the console tab. So if you notice, if I click on either tab, I toggle between them. This is going to tell you all of your errors, all of your warnings, that sort of thing. This is really useful for you as a coder. And now going into the other tabs here. This is the game tab. This is what your user sees. This is going to be totally limited. The user can't do anything unless you've programmed it to be able to do that. So here in the scene view, I can look around, I can move around, which I'll go over the commands here in a bit, but game tab can't do anything unless you've coded it to be able to do so. And finally, the asset store. Now, Scotty, it's my understanding that you do not have the environment package yet. Chad, you do? Is that right?
I think I did download the asset store, so I think I do have that.
I
Chad,
got it, yeah.
You got the environment package, right? The
The
standard
one, yeah,
assets?
I got the email. Mhm.
Perfect. So Scotty, I'm going to quickly show it. You let me know if you already have this stuff. So in the asset store, useful little window as well. Unity has one of the biggest communities in the world, and because of that, they have so many assets in their store. So I'm going to type in what I need, which is the environment package. Or actually, I don't actually need the asset store for that, but if you ever want something, you can simply type it in. Like if I wanted a beach ball, I could just type that into the asset store, and it'll show me a list of things that I could just download and bring into my scene. I can also use filters. So the window is currently too small for me to do this. I can just snap this window out of Unity completely, and this little price module comes up. Check and then apply and find things that are for free. That sort of thing. Obviously a lot more limited to get things for free, but the options there. So that's just a quick little thing. Now what I'll get you to do is, if you don't have this, in your projects tab, right click and go up to import package, and you're looking for the environment tab here.
Okay.
So right click, import package, and environment. Now this is going to prepare the package for you to import. There's going to be a bunch of stuff you can import, but we're not going to import everything because that'll take quite a bit longer. So the first thing I'll get you to do is just checkbox the standard assets folder here. Tick that off, because that way we can just eliminate importing everything right away. Once you've done that, we're going to scroll down until you see this thing called the environment folder. We're going to just tick that off and then click on import. I'm going to show that once more. Standard assets, everything's going to be ticked off by default. You're going to tick that off so it's not. You're going to scroll down until you see the environment folder. You're going to check box next to that, and you're going to click on import.
Where am I going to right click again? I'm sorry.
Right. So in your projects tab here, in this gray space here, you're just going to right click and go over to import. And you want to just import package, it'll give you that list I was talking about. So once this is finished, I can actually show you again, but hopefully it's working for you now.
Yep, got it. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so you see this folder in your projects tab, right? That's what you mean? Or is it still loading for you?
Yeah, it's still loading.
Okay, that's fine.
So I downloaded the assets yesterday, but when I go to my assets folder, it's not there. So I didn't download it actually. Do I have to maybe import it again, or?
Right. So you, I was just making sure you downloaded the standard assets, the environment package, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the whole environment essentials, whatever package, I thought.
Right. So what I would do if I was you then is right click in here and then import a custom package, and then navigate to where you actually downloaded it, and you just click it and then import it. So I don't know if I have any
Where would the default be under Unity or just assets maybe?
If you just download it, it might just be in your downloads folder.
Oh, okay.
If not, you can proceed the same thing. Hopefully your internet isn't too slow.
So I've got a DMG there. I'm on a Mac, so I must have downloaded it and not run it. So I'll just run the DMG one.
It looks very similar to the Unity icon here. The packages that you download looks very similar to this icon.
That's all right.
And we're clicking the entire standard assets package or just environment?
Just environment, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So you have to do that every time you create a new project, or just when you're using Unity?
Just for this instance of it, because we're actually going to use what's called the terrain editor.
Okay.
A lot of the times, for this project, I'm just going to get you comfortable with Unity, and so it's a good method to do so. If you don't need the terrain editor for your particular project, you don't have to import this environment package. Matter of fact, you can actually just import different assets altogether. This, I just believe, is the simplest way for now.
But what, like, every time you create a new project, do you have to like point it to the asset folder, or will it, you know, I'm saying a new project within Unity? Yeah.
So no, unless you want these assets in your project, you don't need to do anything. If I want, I can just right click, and like I was showing, custom package, and then find it. But
okay.
Yeah, generally speaking, you won't need to do that again.
All right, so I got mine now.
All right, great. And Scotty, you're good? Awesome. Now that we have our standard assets, we're going to be able to use them here in a sec. What I'll get you to do is try out making some objects here. So to create what's called a primitive is just one of the shapes that Unity gives you by default, like a cube, a sphere, a cylinder, a capsule, that sort of thing. So to do so, we can right-click in your hierarchy tab here. You right-click, and then all these options come up. You're just going to pick. You're going to pick some 3D object. So we can go with a cube. So bam, there it is in my scene. Now a quick. Now we have a point of reference. It'll be nice to learn how to navigate. So there's our cube. If we hold down our right mouse button, so in our scene view, if we hold down the right mouse button and we move our mouse around, that is us looking around our scene. Now, if we scroll the mouse wheel up and down, that's us zooming in and out. So as I'm saying these ones, so much for pencils down, you're just actually going to try and follow along. So right click, hold. I'll actually quickly check. Do you all have a second screen? Scotty says yes. Chad, do you have a second screen?
Not sure what you mean, a second screen.
So like a second monitor where you can see me.
Oh, no, I didn't. I can get one. I didn't bring one tonight, but that's fine. I got it split.
Okay, that's fine then. Yeah, for future reference, it's going to be a lot easier if you're able to see me and your screen at the same time.
Okay.
But I'll toggle between. So holding down the right mouse button and moving your mouse around is how you look around. Zooming in and out with your mouse wheel. Up for in, out for down for out. And then if you hold down your mouse middle mouse button, you can pan around. So with just the right mouse button and the middle mouse button, you can do most of what you want to do, but I'll teach you the rest for convenience. Now, if I, for example, lose track of an object that I've brought into my scene, I can select that object in the hierarchy tab and then hover my mouse over the scene view, and I can hit F. F for focus, and I'll focus in on that object. So if I'm looking some random place, find this object, I'm going to select it, I'm going to push F, and it'll find it for me. Now, when I am focused on an object, you can do this otherwise as well, but it's useful for when you're focused in on an object. Holding down the Alt key and then pressing the left mouse button, and just like you were looking around, it's another method to sort of rotate your view. And then if you're holding down the Alt key and you use your right mouse button, you can zoom in and out. So yeah, I just kind of want you guys to practice this as we go so that you get comfortable using these types of tools. Next is, I'll show is quickly this little gimbal at the top right. This lets you know what your perspective is. It's pretty handy if you're still struggling with getting used to the whole 3D perspective in your 2D screen. Now, one of the other handy things you can do with that is simply clicking on one of these toggles, and what that will do is it will snap your view from that point of reference. So one of the things I'll mention is the red arrow is the X direction. So let's see if I was to look at it from this view here. So X is going to be positive in the right, negative left. The green arrow is your up and down direction, which is going to be your y-axis. And finally, the blue arrow is going to be your z-axis, which is going to be forward and back. It's important to remember that fact that these are referring to directions such as forward. We will be using that a lot, and it's really handy to know what the forward direction of an object is. So blue is pointing forward, red is pointing right, Y or green is pointing up. Now, with that said, these gimbals, if you select one of them, it will lock your, well, it will lock it, but it'll snap your view to that axis. So if I clicked on the X one, that's red, I'll get a nice view from the side. If I click on the Z, which is a blue, I'll get a nice view from the front, and I can continue going so that I'm getting views from the side. And same thing with the Y. If I click on the Y, I'll get a view from the top and going down between the two. Anyways. Apart from that, there is also the option to change this perspective view here. Right under it's very faded, but you can see this word in my screen. It says persp, which is short for perspective. If I click on that, it'll change to what's called isometric. It just says ISO for short. And essentially the difference is perspective allows you to see the fact that lines converge, giving you a feeling of depth. Isometric lines don't converge, they're parallel. So you get an isometric view. Yeah. Hopefully that's not too much to take in, but that's the general idea. You can toggle between the two. You can sort of more feel the difference than you can, in terms of understanding it by speaking.
So mine, when I click on like right, it just goes from right. It doesn't change to ISO perspective.
So when what I was referring to is like, do you see that little word on right underneath?
Yeah, and mine says right, R-I-G-H-T.
Yours says right on it?
Yeah.
Oh, so I believe that would be currently because it is you know how I was saying you can snap your view by clicking on these gimbals? So
right.
If I click on the X one, the red one, I've snapped my view to the right side. Now if I click on it, it'll still say right, but if you notice the dashed lines that are parallel to each other, I'm in isometric view. So if I start looking around, hold down my right mouse button and I look around, then it changes to isometric. If I hold the Alt key, same thing. Does that make more sense?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yeah, that's just another method to tell you where you're looking from. Looking from the right, I'm looking from the back, looking from the left. Now, with that information, I'm going to move on to the manipulation of an object. Like I was saying with the blue, red, and Y, right now I currently have what's called the Move tool selected. If you don't have that, sometimes you'll just have this what looks like a hand. That's the Pan tool selected. So if you don't have a middle mouse button, if you don't have a scroll wheel, some mouses don't, that's the option to, that's sort of the alternate. Anyways, going over to the move tool, I can start moving the position of an object, and you can see that update in its transform component. So let's say it's at 2 right now. If I move it, now it's at 4, and if I move it like this, it's every point in between. So one of the things you might have noticed is me using the control key a few times. If I hold control and then I move an object, it will essentially snap to 1 meter. So you notice now it's 4, if I move it, now it's 5. Rather than if I just try to move it, it will get values in between. Now, a quick little shortcut I'm going to show you is to just recenter the object. So right now it's at these weird values. I'm going to just right click on the word transform and reset. Perfect. Now it's in the origin of my entire world, 0, 0, 0. With that said, you can actually manually enter values in here. So if I wanted it to be at x1, y2, z3, I can move it along whatever axes I want manually. With movement comes rotation. So if I wanted, I could go to the top left here where I have the rotate tool, and now you're going to see a bunch of circles around it and encompassed in a sphere. Now, shortcuts to go between these two. So if I hit the W key, I'm on the move tool. If I hit the E key, E for echo, I am in the rotation tool. Now, if I select one of these colored axes, so there's the red one, there's the blue one, and then there's the green. These colors are going to correspond with axes that you're rotating around. So the green one is referring to the y-axis. It's going to rotate along the y, which is going to be the up and down. And the red is going to refer to the x-axis. So it's going to rotate along its right and left axis. If you guys remember, this is the red axis, so when I rotate the red, it's going to rotate along that axis. A quick little tip, Control Z is the method to undo something, and then Control Y is how you redo something. So Control Z to undo, Control Y to redo. Redo, undo, redo, undo. And if I'm on the rotation tool, if I want, I can actually just click somewhere in the middle, so not selecting one of these circles, and that's called a free-form rotation. One of the things I should have mentioned earlier was if I'm in the move tool, you can see these little squares in the middle. The color is going to refer to the axes it's not moving along. So these are planes that you move along. So if I click the blue one, that means I'm moving along the XY plane, essentially not the blue axis. So red, and this becomes sort of intuitive after you do it for a bit. So what I'm going to try and get you to do is sort of make some cubes, try to make a basic structure out of it, and get comfortable using this sort of these move tools, these rotate tools. And I'll show you one last one before I let you free here. If you push the R key, you get onto what's called the scale tool. You can also click at the top left, the little square with the arrows pointing outward. This is going to be how you manipulate the object's size along a particular axis or along all axes, keeping the sort of the ratio of the object the same. So again, red is going to be X, so I'm scaling it along the X here. Blue is going to be the Z, and Y is going to be the up and down. The green is going to be up and down. Now, I can scale it like this, and now I have a bit of a rectangular prism going. Or I can try and keep the dimensions the same by scaling it along the middle. So I've just made it bigger, but I did not, I kept the, the ratio the same along the axis. Now, if I hold the control key while I'm doing this, it will snap to 0.1 meters. And if I start doing it at different times, it will then just start snapping in terms of percentages. This snaps to 10%. And back in the rotates tools, sorry, I have to do this again. If I hold the control key and rotate an object along an axis, it will rotate 15 degrees at a time. And again, one last thing I'll mention is you can enter numbers in manually. Just don't forget that. So I'm going to start creating. Let's see. I'll create a quick little house. I'll get you guys to sort of get comfortable with this. Make some structure. I'll give you guys about 5 minutes, and we'll show each other what we've made. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to be saying what I'm doing. So if you guys want to try and get familiar with what was going on again, you can watch what I'm doing as well. Sort of toggle in between what you're doing and what I'm doing, if you want. Totally optional. So now I push the W key so I can move the object. I'm going to Control Z that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click in the hierarchy tab. I'm going to go to 3D object and create another cube. Now I have two. Right clicking on the word transform there. I'm going to reset so that it's 0, 0, 0 again. Let's select this other cube I made and I'm going to reset that to 0, 0. So now they're about the same. Holding the control key and I'm going to drag my mouse, drag it along the edge here, and so now it's sort of snapping along. I'm going to create another cube and I will reset this as well. There we go. So I'm going to quickly grab your attention real quick, guys. One of the things that I should mention to sort of help you speed up your process is if you have an object selected, you can use the shortcut Control D, and that allows you to duplicate an object. Control D, duplicate. You can also do the same thing by right-clicking an object in the hierarchy tab on the far left and just clicking duplicate. You can also do a copy-paste. So Control C, Control V, 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 V. So just make your own replicas that way. Alright, so I'll mention that again real quick. If you want, you can have an object selected, Control D to duplicate, or you can select that object in the hierarchy tab on your left and right click on the object and select duplicate, which is the fourth option, and sort of go from there and just try and get comfortable with this system.
I'm on a Mac. Are the control? It's more like it's probably different keys on a Mac, right?
Right. Sorry, my mistake. I should have checked whether or not you had a PC. A lot of the codes like Control and Alt can be replaced by the Command key and the flower. Sorry, I'm not familiar with the Mac system.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm sorry, you might have to fiddle around with it. Oh no, he's gone. I thought you were so bad you left.
No. I have to get my other monitor. I'm kind of cramped for space.
Okay, how long do you think that will take?
Next meeting.
Oh, okay. But you're gonna stick around at least for right?
Oh yeah, that was an accident. That was me not having enough real estate. Yeah.
Okay, all right. By the way, you can also select multiple objects by selecting one and then holding the Shift key. I think this is the same for Mac as well. Holding the Shift key and clicking on another object, and that will highlight and select all the objects between the two. You can also select an object holding the Command or Control key and clicking on another object to select it. So that allows you to select multiple objects without actually selecting everything between two objects. And so that's what I've done. I've selected the one object, shift, holding the shift key, clicking on the other object, and then scaling it along the X in my case, so that it looks like a bit of a tunnel.
Is there a way to like snap to an object, like make it just sit on top automatically without eyeing it?
Yes, for sure. So I'll show that real quick. I will create a 3D object, a cube, and then I will create a, let's just create another one so that I'm not cheating here. Create another 3D object here. So what I will do is I will hold the V for Victor, V key, and I will, sorry, I'm going to just turn pointer focus off for a second, because if I hold the key down, it spazzes out a little bit. Or I guess I don't need to turn it off completely, but just the keystrokes. Okay, so I'm holding down the V key. I will be able to highlight a corner. So I'm going to select this corner, and then I can snap it to that of another object. So I'll just show that again. So I have an object, this cube. I'm going to hold the V key, V for Victor, and as I hover over the object, a corner or a side or the midpoint of a side gets highlighted. I'm going to select the corner closest to me on this cube, and I'm going to then, it's going to automatically start snapping to other objects. So I'm going to just select the appropriate corner I want for it to snap along. I hope that answers your question, Chad.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, got it.
Awesome. All right, so now what hoping you guys are a bit more comfortable with this stuff. There is a couple more unique tools here. There's one more. So again, the shortcut keys for these tools up here to really help you speed up your development process. Q is your command to pan, but the ones for manipulation are W for movement. You can move your objects around. Control Z to undo. E echo for rotation. R Romeo for scale. And a new one called T. T allows you to scale the object along only two axes at the same time. Unlike the scale tool, which forces you to do one or all of them. This one, based on what direction you're looking at the object from, it will then take the act as though that's the plane, and then you can scale the object up as if it was like a window on your desktop. All right. Now, before we move on, I'm going to ask you guys to share. That's part of this course. It encourages you to work a bit harder. Scotty, let's see what you've made. Scotty, you're muted. I can't hear you. Still muted. I can't hear you. There we go.
I'm sorry. How do I share my screen again? I'm sorry. I only have 3 cubes.
Okay. Are you in the window? You're able to see me right now, or see me sharing?
Yeah.
So at the bottom right of your screen, you'll see this little blue square pop up. You see that? So watch my screen and I'll show you the process.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Looking at me, I am going to the bottom right. A little window white bar pops up, and then there's this little box here. I'm going to click on that box. And then you can get the option to present. I can't show you the startup process because that would require me to stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Shoot. Maybe go to Chad first so I can figure this out.
All right, Chad, let's see what you've got.
Okay, prepare to be underwhelmed. I guess I'll do that and present. So basically, I was just figuring things out, and when I created this, I created a sub cube in other cubes by accident.
Right. No, that's we're actually about to go over that here in a
Well,
second.
I
But
was like, why are they all moving together? Well, that's why. So what I did test the snapping to the top. So the top cube here did snap well to my other one. So thank you for the V technique. And then that's about all I did.
all right. So I'll give you guys a couple more minutes, but first I will go over this little grouping thing you've done here.
Okay.
All right. So what Chad has discovered by accident, I'm guessing it was an accident.
Yes.
Is it's what that's called is a parent-child relationship, or in your case, a hierarchy of parents and children. So if I take what I have here as, let me delete all of these. These are going to be confusing. If I create a cube here, this is its own child. Or I should say, it has no children, it has no relationships. It's a very lonely cube. And so if I create another one, this other cube, let's actually, to represent this a bit easier, I'm going to create a different shape. So this time I'm going to create a sphere. So now the sphere. Right now, these cubes and spheres have no relationship. If I was to then click and drag one of these objects onto the other, I would make it a child of the other object. So let's say I take this sphere and I click and drag it onto my cube. Now, this hierarchy also allows me to sort of minimize and maximize this list of objects. Now, sorry to ask this again, guys, but I'm just going to get you to mute yourselves while you're not talking. Perfect. So this cube, the sphere is a child of the cube. So what that means is if I move the cube, the transform of the sphere will follow. So this property, this parent-child relationship, is really only referencing the transform property. So if I take the cube, I move the cube, the child follows. If I take the child and move the child, the cube, the parent, does not follow. Now this hierarchy can go down forever. So if I wanted, I could create a 3D object. Let's create a capsule this time. Now let's say this capsule is going to be a child of the sphere. I'm going to click and drag this onto the sphere, and that makes it a child. So like before, a child is free, and I take the sphere. Sphere is free of the cube, but the capsule is not. And the cube is the capsule's grandparent. Essentially, you can look at it that way, and it moves all the objects that are its children. The capsule moves because the sphere is moving, and the sphere moves because the cube is moving. Now, if I wanted, I could have multiple objects that are children. So let's say I created another object. I'm just going to make it the same shape as the capsule so that it's obvious that these two objects are brother and sister, or just brothers, or just sisters, whatever you want to go with. I am taking this cube, I move the cube, both all of its kids and grandkids move. I take the sphere, I move the sphere, all of its children move. I take one capsule, it has no kids, take the other capsule, it has no kids, so it's free to move on its own. With that said, this also affects each object's rotation. So if I rotate the cube, and this is incredibly useful too, if I rotate the cube, all of its children rotate with it. So again, the parent-child relationship really just extends to the fact that position, rotation, and scale are going to be impacted to all of its children. So if I rotate the cube, it rotates everything. Whereas if all of these things were independent and I was to rotate all of them independently, they would just rotate on point where they are themselves, rather than rotating along the parent. It's a very different way of them moving, as you can see. And lastly, if I scale up one, all of them scale. But notice how they're scaling. They're scaling and then they're growing apart. Whereas if I was to have them as independent objects, selecting all of them and then scaling them, they all scale from their own point of origin. So that's really the difference. It's parent-child relationships are going to impact their position, rotation, and scale in space. Now, one last thing. Let me position these in a certain way. So one thing I can point out here is, oh, by the way, to unparent and unchild relationship. So if the capsule is a child of the capsule, so these this one is a child of this one. To unchild them, you just click and drag them out, and then bam, they're done. So parent-child relationship formed is when you click an object on top of the other. Otherwise, you can just click and drag them out. Another way this happens is if you have an object highlighted, or you're right-clicking on an object and then you go to create object, the object that you create will automatically be a child of the other object. Now with this cube here, what I was wanting to show with the cube and the sphere, right now I have them both at the origin of the world space. So they're at 0, 0, 0 in the x-axis, and the rotation and scale is set to default. Rotation's at 0, scale's at 1. So let's say I move the sphere. I move the sphere 3 meters forward, so that's 3 in the z. Now, the cube is here, so that's fine. It's 0, 0. You can see the values make sense. Now, let's say I move the cube. I move the cube 1 meter forward. Let me just delete these capsules here, get them out of the way. So I move this cube 1 meter forward, so it says its z is 1. The sphere is still at 3, so it says its z is 3. Now, if I take the sphere and make it a child of the cube, notice its position is now 2, because the transform of an object is going to be relative to its parent. So if wherever a parent is, that's going to be the origin for its children. So if I rotate the cube, let's say 90 degrees along the z, or let's just say 45. So I rotate this cube 45. The sphere has technically rotated 45 degrees, but its parent is 45. So for it, its rotation is still 0. Again, so children are just relative to its parents. Well, did not mean to do that. So I'm going to delete that. I have a fresh new scene, and I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to sort of go from there, and let's see if you guys are up to speed on this, and I'll repeat any principles that you need a better understanding of. I'm going to quickly repeat some of the principles here, and you let me know if you need more explanation or anything. So, bit of a review already. Creating objects. Right-clicking in the hierarchy tab, which is on the far left, which lists all the objects in your world. Went down to 3D object, going to create a cube. And you can create other objects as well if you want to select, and you can create a sphere. Notice that since I had this object selected and I created another one, it automatically became a child. To make it not a child anymore, just click and drag it out. Just click and drag it down. Just so you're not clicking and dragging it onto an object. And that's how you make it a child. Clicking and dragging this stuff. Now, if I want to move an object, I push the W key or select the move tool at the top left. If I want to rotate an object, I can select objects through the scene view or select them in the hierarchy tab. I can then push the E button, E for echo, or select the rotate tool at the top left and move the object around. Each color represents a particular axis. Now, if I want, I can also scale an object up by hitting the R key, R for Romeo, or at the top left by selecting the scale tool. And finally, I can push the T key to scale an object along 2 axes at once, and move the object at the same time by clicking on the middle circle there.
Okay, sure. By the way, from last week, did you get the...
And I'll move it along that plane as well. And lastly, I didn't mention this before, but if you want, you can do a bunch of things at once. Doing all of the first 3D tools at once. If I hit the Y key, it gives me the option to move, rotate, and scale an object at once. It sort of shows all 3 tools at once. Handy at times, can be annoying at other times. It's totally up to you. So that's movement. terms of creating an object, you can right click and then duplicate. You can Control C to copy, Control V to paste, or you can just copy and paste in the hierarchy tab. You can also delete objects by having one selected and hitting the delete key, or right clicking the object and selecting delete. So I'll give you guys, let's say 3 minutes, so that we're at my time. It'll be 5:35, but hopefully I'll give enough time to continue on. Get comfortable. Please, if you're confused about any one of those things I've mentioned, ask questions about some of the other things that I've mentioned. Ask questions.
I'm trying to put a plane on top of a square.
A square?
So yeah, so I've got a square.
Uh-huh.
Can I show you? I'll just share with you, I guess. So I've got this plane here. Can you see that?
Yes.
And if I wanted to put on top of this cylinder, I would hit a Z on this, or hit a Z and then click this, or how does that work? I can't.
Are you trying to snap it?
Yeah, snap it horizontally. Do I have to make it horizontal first?
So I think you meant V, right? So if I push the V key, I can select one point on this plane. So if I'm holding V, I can select any point on this plane, and then let me see, I selected holding V.
Okay.
Drag in. Oh, sorry, I made it a child. That's why. Okay, so plane selected, boom, and then I can snap it.
So if I were to, this is probably a vertical plane that I made. If I want to make that flat, I would rotate it on the X scale 180 or something, or what?
So right now it is horizontal plane. If you notice that you have the isometric view right now.
Yep.
So you can disable isometric view by clicking on those little dashed lines under your gimbal. Yeah.
Okay.
That gives you I feel like it gives you more perspective. No pun intended. But yeah, so it is a horizontal plane right now.
Ooh, it just disappeared.
So since it's like infinitely thin, you can sort of get a bit of an angle on it. So I would recommend pushing down the right mouse button in your scene view, and then yeah, you can do it too. So yeah, navigate around, get comfortable looking around with the tools.
Uh-huh.
And then if you want, you can hold the middle mouse button down and pan up. So if you want to, there you go.
So if I hit this and I hit V, or this V,
yeah, and then
that corner, I want it to be on top of this.
So you just click and drag some point from that plane, and then you just click and drag it onto the cylinder. Make sure the cylinder is select there, and then boom.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
No worries. Okay, so I'm seeing more than 2 shapes this time. That's good. All right. So yeah, I'll give you guys maybe a minute or 2 more, make something, and I'll ask you guys to share, and we'll move on to the terrain editor. All right. Now, going forward, I know I'm interrupting you guys quite a bit. I just want to get in some cool things here. Back in your projects tab, if you guys can watch my screen, so pencils down for a sec. In your projects tab, right click in that scene there, and we're going to go to creating a new folder. Right click, create, and you're looking for the word folder. So first options on both of them. One more time. In my projects tab, right click, create, folder, and I'm going to name this one materials. We're going to be using this one quite a bit. So I've named a folder, created a folder. I'm going to double click in there, and I'm going to create a material. So I'll let you guys get up to this point at least. Projects tab, right click, create, so pencils up for this bit. Creating a folder, nice and simple. Once you've created your folder, you want to name it materials. Once you have this materials folder, we're going to then go into that folder and create a material. So right-clicking in your Projects tab, going up to Create, and you're going to scroll down until you see the word Material. So now that we've created a material, I'm going to give it a name. So let's say I'll name this one Blue. So this is how we color our objects. Name this one Blue, let me create an object to color. By default, when I have an object selected, at the far right in the inspector, you'll see a Mesh Renderer. Mesh Renderer holds the object's material. You can actually hold an array of materials, but we won't get into that. Default material is this whitish eggshell type shade. And when you create your own material, it's going to be that as well by default. Now you can change the color of your material by selecting it in your Projects tab and going to the top right of the inspector. You'll see this white rectangle here next to a little eyedropper symbol. You want to select that white rectangle, and then you'll be able to change the brightness in the big square vertically and the saturation horizontally. Also, you can pick the hue of the color you want. So I want to make it blue, so I'm going to select something bluish here, and I'm going to just move this until I'm comfortable with the shade I'm getting here. So fiddle around with that. This is your color picker. So I'm going to quickly show that again. I've created a material, so I'm right-clicking in my tab, my Projects tab. I'm going to go up to Create, and I'm going to select Material. It's the options here. Once you have your material selected, it's going to give you the option to name it. I'm going to name it Red. This one's been created, so now I select my red material. Right now, it's by default, it's white. I'm going to look at the far right in the Inspector tab. I'm going to see this white rectangle. I'm going to click on that to change the color. And this time, I'm just going to pick red by move my mouse into this big white, square that has white on the top left, and it sort of fades to bright red, and down it fades to black. I'm going to click in that box and wherever I feel like is a good spot. So I'm going to make it bright red. Now to color my object, I would simply click and drag it onto the object. So I have my cube here. I can click and drag these materials onto the far right into the inspector, or I can simply click and drag them onto the cube in the scene view, or I can even click and drag them onto the object in the hierarchy tab. So in terms of coloring my objects, I can take my materials, click and drag them onto the object in the scene view, click and drag them onto the object in the hierarchy tab in the list, or if I have the object selected, I can click and drag these colors into the inspector. These are just 3 different ways to do the same thing. Alright, so now that you know how to color your objects, hopefully you get a bit more of a colorful scene in your window.
You don't have to. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Since you're running it on the OVR, I put stuff with the here. You can keep it on the controller that way. It kind of makes sense to upload it to get all your scripts your controls. And that's usually how I put it. What do you mean? So I'm just gonna go back. Do you already have one on your player? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So you can disable the one that you have on your player. Because now we have one on our. Let's do a quick build on that one. Hopefully we can get this through. Make sure that that is actually right.
Alright, we're going to spend the rest of it sort of working on our terrain, but before we move on, I'd like to see some of the things you guys have made. So, Scotty Jones, do you figure out how to share your screen? Remember, you've muted yourself, I'm guessing, in 2 different ways. Currently muted. There you go.
No, I have not. So forgive me. Oh, hold on. Present now. Is that what I'm supposed to click?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, that looks interesting. Can you click on the top right of your scene view where it says ISO? There's little parallel lines right underneath that colorful gimbal. Yeah. Okay.
Uh-oh.
No, that's good. That's good. I wanted to see it this way. So this is perspective view. So this is what the user sees. This is the view the user sees in, unless you change the default.
Okay.
All right, that looks interesting.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? Abstract art, right?
Yeah, you're being kind. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Scotty. Can you apply that blue material you've made to one of those objects? Awesome. I just want to make sure that you know how to do that. Perfect. Chad, let's take a look at something colorful little scene.
All right. Give me a shot. So
Nice.
if I wanted to make all these cubes, what's the easiest way to make them all the same size? Because they're different sizes.
All the same size?
Yeah, if I want to all, because they're different sizes, I believe, or is it just a perspective?
I think you're just in a different perspective because some of them are moved slightly closer to you and others are a little further back.
And what would be the quickest way to straighten them, put them all parallel?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Since they're children of each other, if you want to click on the middle cube there, I would just click on reset, or I would just let's see. You see the X position there in the transform? I would zero that X out. So click inside the input field next to the X. So you were hovering over the right place, yeah? In the top right. Right up a little bit. So that's
here?
There,
The
exactly.
position?
So yeah, exactly. Click on there, and then just zero it out. Perfect. Awesome.
Okay.
And then I would do the same thing with the third cube there.
Okay.
So it looks good in there. Oh, it's just rotated a bit. If you want, you can zero out the Y rotation.
Okay. Cool.
They're about the same size. I think it's just a matter of fact that they're a little bit, they're intersecting each other a little bit. That's about it. Now that one is inside the other one.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's just some stuff you have to fill around with and get comfortable with how you want to approach it. But I think by the end of the course, you'll be pretty comfortable with it, so you'll be all right.
All right.
Okay. Think it looks good. I want to make sure you guys are learning this stuff, you know?
Yep.
Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually get into the terrain editor. So I'm going to remove this cube here. Nope, did not mean to do that. All right. In our hierarchy tab, what we're going to do is right click in here. We're going to create a 3D object. We're going to train. So I'll get you guys to do this now. In our hierarchy tab, right click, 3D object, scroll down to terrain. So when you create it, you'll see this huge white plane appear. This white plane is going to be something you can mold and paint to your liking. I think by default it is 500 by 500. So this plane is 500 meters by 500 meters. Now, one of the things we do in our course to sort of set it up so it looks nice is we're going to go through a couple steps and make sure that it is set up for us to really have some fun in making this thing look really pretty. First step, what we're going to do is we're going to go navigate to our assets folder. So in our projects tab, we're going to go to standard assets, environment, and then we're going to look for water. So water is the third option. There's water basic, but we're just going to select the third one. And then we're going to select water 4. So there's a bit of a navigation here. And then we're going to go into prefabs. So I'm going to say this path again. You guys follow along if you can. So we're looking at our projects tab. We're in our assets folder. We're going to go to standard assets. We're going to go to environment. And then we're going to go to the third option, which is water. And then we're going to go to the second one, which is water 4. And then prefabs, which is straight in the middle. Now you'll come across these 2 blue cubes. We're going to click and drag the one on the left, which is called water 4 advanced, into our scene. So then this guy is going to appear probably maybe in the middle of your scene. Now the way the terrain is set up is you create a water level for your world, and then the terrain you sculpt along, sort of around that level. Now the way we're going to do that first is, you know where the water is. One of the things you got to understand about the water asset is the fact that it is 100 by 100 meters. Your terrain is 500 by 500 meters. These are the things you'll have to remember. We're just going to quickly mention these now. All that means is we need to multiply the scale of our terrain, of our water, by 5 so that it matches the size of our terrain. So I'm going to click on this water 4 advanced prefab. If you don't, if you're not sure, it's the one that is blue in text. I'll go over the reason why it's blue and stuff later, but for now, I'm going to select it and we're going to look for its scale property in the transform. So I brought this into my scene. I've clicked and dragged the water 4 prefab into my scene. It shows this nice little water square in the middle of my world. If you don't see it in the middle, you can just right click the transform and reset. Anyways, you have the object selected. We're going to go to the scale and the X. I'm going to set that to 5 manually. I'm going to select the Z and set that to 5 manually. We don't want to adjust the Y unless you want to make the waves really big. But for now, that's all we're going to do. We're going to set that up. We're then going to take this water 4 advanced object and we're going to move it to the center of our terrain. Our center of the terrain is actually going to be 250 in the X and 250 in the Z. 250X and 250 in the Z. So now our water and our terrain are perfectly lined up. It's going to look real nice when we get to sculpting. Now what we can do is select a water level and a basic terrain level. Now to do that, we're going to select, we're going to adjust the Y value of our water. So right now it's 250X, 250Z. Our Y value we're going to set to, again, this is when you have the object selected on the far right in the inspector tab. We're going to set the Y value of its transform position to 25. Let's go with 25. Again, these things you can adjust as you want, but I'll just stick with 25. Now you're going to go back to your terrain. Moving your terrain isn't a good idea because that doesn't really help you adjust the sculpting, so just edit the values in the second tool tab. So now you have the terrain selected. You're going to go into the inspector tab where you see the terrain component on the right side there. Right under the transform component, you'll see the terrain component. In there, you're going to see this tool that's called paint height. It's the second tool from the left, right next to raise and lower terrain. This is just an initial setup to get you going with your terrain. Now, when you select that second tool, it's the one with the hills painted, but with 2 arrows pointing at each other vertically. You're going to go look for this thing under the settings tab that says height and then the word flatten next to it. I think by default it's at 30, so if that's for you, that's great. Select a value you want. I'm going to go stick with 30 in the input field and I'm going to click the flatten button. And now the terrain is flattened right above my water. So now I can start painting away at it and it will sort of look nice. And then when I dig into the water, I get a nice little terrain looking thing here. Now I can work with this. I can sculpt this and make it look nice. So is everyone at that part? Because I'm going to repeat that real quick. But once you get to that point, it'll be a lot easier to go through the rest. So setting up the water, I click and drag that prefab that we navigated to into my scene. I'll see it in my world somewhere. What I'm going to do is when I have that object selected, I'm going to go to the transform component of it. I'm going to set its position to 250 in the X, 250 in the Z, 25 in the Y. So 250, 25, 250. I'm going to change the scale to 5 in the X, 5 in the Z. So now that's going to match up perfectly with our terrain. And deleted this one because I already have one. Now, once my water is in that position, that's great. My terrain, what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to go to the paint height tool. So I select my terrain, go to the far right under the inspector, and you'll see this little tabs out, terrain. I'm going to click on the second tab called paint height. Once you're there, you're going to see this little settings option open up at the bottom with brush size, opacity, height. Height's the important one. We're going to set a value in that input field. And I'm going to type in 30, and I'm going to click on the flatten button. It'll bring the terrain above your water, and we can sculpt from there. Everyone at this point yet?
Can I just look at the recording and go back and do it? I'm so lost right now, and I don't want to slow anybody down.
Chad, are you at this point yet?
I am pretty jammed up as well.
All right.
So, you know, I don't know if we can share, share screens or whatever, but
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So I'm sorry if I'm getting a little anxious because we have a little bit of time left. I'm trying to squeeze in a bit, but we'll be able to continue where we left off next time. But I guess we might as well make sure we're all at this point because the rest of it gets really, really fun.
yeah. I just, my terrain, when I put it in, did not end up looking like yours, just initially.
Just a flat white square?
Yeah, it was like, yeah, so.
Okay. Let's take a look at your screen, Chad.
Okay.
So what we can do instead is
Scotty, don't worry about us. You slowing anybody down? There's only you and Chad. I think you guys are going to be roughly at the same pace here.
So can you see my screen?
Not yet, no. I'm seeing you right now.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I put it in, it was like this. I don't know.
No, I mean I'm seeing your face right now.
Oh, it's nothing. It's a horrible thing. Let's see. Present now. Entire screen. There we go. Now you should see this. So the terrain, I just put it in, it was like this.
One moment. Maybe I'll just double check here. Terrain. It looks fine, actually. That's what it should be. That's good.
Just my perspective. That's what I'm kind of confused always about, is just what I'm looking at, because mine never.
Right. Okay, so I would try first zooming out. So scroll the mouse wheel down. Yeah.
Oh,
there
it's
you
so
go.
close that it looked. Okay, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all
So
right,
now,
so I had that.
so
Then
next,
you went here, and it was 250, 25, 250.
perfect. 515. Awesome.
That's good.
Exactly.
So now,
So you're just one step. That's it. Terrain. You select terrain,
yep.
and then you see that second tool.
Right.
I think you know. Can you finish this up?
And flatten, you didn't change it, did you? Or 60?
No,
Can't remember.
I was good with 30, just because my water level's 25. I just want to be above it.
Okay.
Perfect. So you're all caught up. How about you, Scotty? Let's make sure you're caught up too.
So I'm going to close out my screen. I don't need to see.
All right, Scotty. Okay, awesome. You're already at the place. So click. You see that left blue cube there in the bottom? Yeah, just click and drag that into the hierarchy tab. Well, that works too. So now we're just going to quickly adjust some values. So you have the water selected right now, so that's great. On the far right, towards the top, you see the transform component. Right. Awesome. So you're going to set values in there. So you're going to do 250 in the X. So you click into that input field and just type in 250. Now, if you hit Tab, the Tab key will automatically put you to the next one. Type in 25. Hit Tab again and 250. Perfect. Now, towards the lower part of that scale, you'll see the scale line there, X, Y, and Z in the scale. Set X to 5 and Z to 5. Do you guys say Z or Z?
Z. I guess in England they say Z.
Alright. Okay, so that's set up for your water. Perfect. Now let's select your terrain on the far left. And we're going to go to that second tool in the middle there. So if you go to the far right in your inspector window, there's the terrain option there, and then the second tool is called height. There you go, paint height. That's the one you want to click. And then closer to the bottom is, oh, for you it's 120. Okay, so right, the third slider at the bottom, do you see that one? So that's the height slider. So in where it says 120, click in there and change that to 30, and just click on flatten. Perfect, you're all caught up. Now what I would do is just hit the F key right now. Does that work? Okay, select your terrain on the far left in the hierarchy tab. Double click that. Awesome. Isometric view, I guess. So your terrain has been moved. Oh, I see what happened. Okay. So when we were entering those values for the water, you put them into your terrain. So what I would do is right click on the word transform in the inspector tab there and just reset it. Perfect. You're all caught up. Now we're all at the same point. Ask you a quick question, Scotty. Do you prefer it being in isometric, or was that by just accident or something?
Definitely accident.
All right. All right. I'm glad actually, because I hate working in isometric view. So at the top right, where's those 3 dash line? That's called isometric. Yeah, it just says ISO. If you click on that, I'll change it to PERSP, which is short for perspective. Awesome. Okay. Are you guys okay with going a couple minutes over 6?
I am, yeah.
Scotty, you got a few minutes to spare?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So I'll show my screen again, and this is what we're going to do next. In your terrain, I would first advise get a good, comfortable view of it. I'm going to quickly go over one of the tools here that you can work with, and next class we'll sort of pick up where we left off and work with the paint and everything else. So now that we've set up our terrain, it's a lovely piece of land that's totally ours. What we're going to do is the left tool here, the far left one, so right next to where we clicked on the paint tool, this is the raise and lower terrain tool. If you click and drag along the surface of this terrain, you will raise the height of the land. So if I click and drag along the surface, I'm going to raise and lower the height of the terrain. So this is going to grow hills and such. Wow, that's really bright. I'm going to just lower that down a little bit. Good. Anyways, let me lower the height intensity a little bit. There we go. So on my terrain, that's one way of raising the height. Now, for me, it's gone really quickly because my brush size and opacity are really high. So in the same option in this setting here, in the terrain, if you go down to settings, you'll see brush size and opacity. You can change that so that it's a bit more sensitive. So I'm going to, for example, I'll lower my brush size to, let's say, 60, and then my opacity down to like 22, arbitrary values, just so that it's not so extreme. And now I can sort of make finer edits to my terrain. Still want it to be kind of larger impact, so I'm going to keep my brush size the same. So as you can see, I can make a few changes to my terrain, create some hills. Now that's nice and all, but I want to be able to create some rivers. That's what we set up all that water for. So to do that, I hold down the Shift key. So I think that's the same for Mac as well. Holding down the Shift key, I'm going to click and drag on my land and create a nice little river. And
what's the Shift key doing? What does that mean? How does that come into play?
So when I'm left clicking and dragging along, that's raising the tool. And so what allows it, if I hold the Shift key,
oh, it's opposite. Okay.
Yeah, it'll do the, yeah, exactly. It'll do the opposite.
Okay.
Nice little fun way to add a terrain. How much time do you think you can go over? because I think it'd be nice to send you guys off with a couple more tools here.
That sounds good to me.
All right, so you guys willing to stay for another, let's say, 8 minutes? How about we go over 8 minutes?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, cool. So this is a method of sculpting your terrain. So this is your own personal piece of land. You can make it bigger, and I'll go over that later. Or I actually do that now before you invest too much time in a small piece of land if you consider it small. On the far right of your terrain little palette here is a gear symbol. If you select that, you can scroll on down and edit a bunch of different settings. For now, we're just going to concentrate on these two. Resolution, where it says terrain width and terrain length. That's going to be the dimensions for your heights, for your terrain. So if I wanted, I can go from 500 to 1000. And now it is 4 times as large. I say 4 times because that's in terms of area, but the dimensions have been doubled. It's even larger. Now, remember that if you're going to make it bigger, you also want to make sure that the water is larger as well. So I would go from 5 to 10 in that case, and then change it from 250 to 500. Again, this is totally optional. You don't have to do that. One of the things it does do is scale your modifications along as well. So if you've already started editing your tool, you can go back into the paint height tool. Make sure your terrain is selected. Go back to the paint height tool and just flatten it out again. Get a fresh start with a bigger land. Now, anyway, so we went over raising the. Come on. Oh, right. Make sure the paint raise and lower terrain tool is selected. You can raise the terrain and you can lower the terrain. You can edit those brushes as you want as well. So I have the basic brush selected, but you guys can definitely change what brush style you want. So if I want to select one of these, I get more of a roughing up of my terrain. Makes it maybe look a bit more realistic at times. And totally adjust look and feel of your world. Anyway, so that's using the paint and lower the height and sculpting tool here. You can also paint height. So instead of just flattening, you can actually just decide to paint a height. So sort of reverting back to the base that you start with. So hopefully that's a good explanation of the sculpting tools. The main thing I wanted to make sure we get in is the painting the terrain as well as planting some trees into your world. Now, are you guys familiar with this part of it so far? Can I move on?
Right, so
Yeah.
that's actually what I want to show you.
Okay. Now, I will post the recording as soon as I can, and I will send you a link to the recording of it. From there, you guys can check it out if you missed anything. The next thing I'm going to show you is the smooth height tool. So it's like a little water droplet above the mountains. The third option, you can use that to just smooth out the rough edges. Click and drag that, and I'll smooth it out. It's what it's technically doing is averaging the height of the area that it's around. Just keep doing that, and it'll just sort of mold it, smooth it out. Anyways, that's a quick view of that. The important one I wanted to go over was the next one. It's a paint texture tool. It looks like a paintbrush. It's the fourth option, straight in the middle. With this one, you can literally change what the terrain looks like. So sand, grass, hills, that sort of thing. So while you have the texture tool selected, you're going to go down to edit textures. So the terrain tool, middle one, paintbrush, looking for textures. You're looking for this edit textures button. You're going to click on that and you're going to add a texture. So again, terrain selected under the terrain component. in the inspector, going down to edit textures, you're going to add a texture. Once you click that, a prompt appears that asks you to select a texture you want to add. You're going to, under the albedo here, this big none texture 2D square with a little select button to the bottom right of it. I'm going to click on select, and you can choose any texture you want. Like you can use a Boba Fett head if you wanted, or like, I don't know, Donald Trump's hair or whatever you'd like to use. But all you got to do in the search icon, what I would recommend is using either sand or grass or cliff. So let's type in grass, or you know what, I'll go with sand. Type in sand. When I type that in the search bar, you'll see a albedo appear. That says sand. Double click that. Now the first texture you add will automatically be applied to your entire world. So I can click on that. Boom. Now my entire train is painted with sand. Now to paint anything else, you need to add a second texture. I go back to edit, add texture, select, and this time I'm going to type in grass. And you want to use one of these two here, grass hill albedo, grass rock albedo. Add that. Now that I have that option, I'm going to, I'm going to go over the other textures you have the option to use. I'm going to go cliff albedo. And you also have something like mud, but I'll just add another grass one. Grass rock, I'll take that one. So now I've added 4. Now I can switch between them and paint the train that way. So I'm going to select the grass texture, and I'm going to start painting that. Now target strength is going to determine how much you paint, and opacity to determine how quickly you do it. So I can start painting over everything here, giving it a bit of a grass feel. So painted it that way. I'm going to go over to grassy rock. So painting the grassy rock texture here. So fill this out. And I want to paint some cliffs here. And yeah, so that gets you a sense of painting the textures. Now again, I might be going a little quick. Usually I would repeat stuff, but hopefully you can supplement this with the recording. And if you have any questions, please post them in Slack.
One real quick question. What if you wanted to add like a flat, like a mesa type of hill, you know, like the Grand Canyon where it's a flat top? Is there a way to do it usually?
Yes, exactly. So if you go to the paint height tool, you can see, remember the option to paint the height, paints it flat like that. So if you want to paint a plateau, you can raise the height. So by now, for me, it's 30. I think for both of you, it will be 30 as well. You can increase that number. So I can say something like, let's see, 60. Let's say 60. So I have 60. I'm going to just decrease this brush size so that it's not too large. So now 60, I painted. It's too low, so I'll Control Z. I'm going to increase this height from 60 to 90. And now I'm going to paint a nice little plateau on top.
Okay. All right. So you basically paint the terrain and then go over it and change the height of the flatten to higher than what you originally painted, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I'm not putting a lot of effort into this. Usually I make it look nice and pretty, but yeah. So with that said, the last thing I want to go over is the trees. Again, I'm sorry I'm going over time, but trees, when you have trees selected, you're going to go find that Edit Trees button. It's very similar to how we selected textures. I'm going to click on Edit Trees and then Add a Tree. For these ones, instead of a little select button, you're going to see a little circle on the far right. I'm going to click on that, and it should show you some trees to select. If you can't find any, type in conifer, broadleaf, or palm. I'll give you the option to select one of those. So I'm just going to select the conifer. And once I have it selected, it's going to show me that there, and I'm going to add. And now got to be careful. You don't want to add too many at once. But you'll have it selected by default, and you can just click around and it will add trees. Now again, I want to say you don't want to add too many by default. Generally speaking, you want to lower this brush size by a lot, or this tree density by a lot. And I even like to go one tree at a time sometimes, so I'll lower my brush size all the way down to 1, and then I will decide where I'm putting these trees. You can also click the mass place trees option, but again, you want to make sure you're comfortable with the density of trees that are being placed, or number of trees. So I want to lower that down to, let's say, 500, and we'll get a feel for how many that is. Bam. Not the best tool because it does not care where it's placing trees. So if you place trees that you don't want, make sure that your brush is big enough to get rid of them. So I would hold Shift and click and drag over the trees I don't want. So holding Shift, clicking and dragging over the trees, that's how you can remove them. And now going over a little bit of that again, just to show the different trees. You select these little lollipop looking things in the tool tab, go over down to Edit Trees, Add a Tree, and a prompt comes up with the word Add Tree. You're going to click on that little circle, and you'll get a few options to choose from. If you can't find them right away, just type in either broadleaf, conifer, or palm. You can see them listed here, and then select the one you want. So I'll pick a palm this time, and you add it to terrain. You can change your brush size, tree density. I want to make it 1 here so I can sort of really choose where I'm putting these guys. And there we go. Pretty satisfied with that. You can sort of mess around and get something you like. So yeah, the challenge will be to challenge usually for the end of the week, but for now, for next class, please have some nice looking terrain ready to go. We're going to use that going forward so that your project is being developed in that as your sort of your level. So think about a shooting gallery, and so have that in the back of your mind that you want some places that you're going to be shooting targets, that sort of thing. All right, guys. Sorry for going over, but didn't want to leave this stuff sort of unfinished, I guess. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. It was really nice meeting you.
Great, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You guys take care. I'm going to stop the recording there.